Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that most of the things governing your life do not physically exist. Money, nations, status, reputation, laws, corporations, social classes. None of them can be found in nature. You cannot dig them out of the ground. You cannot observe them through a microscope. You cannot locate them inside the human brain. And yet they control the behavior of billions of people. People dedicate entire lives to them, fight wars over them, sacrifice freedom for them, even die for them. How is that possible? Because human beings live in two worlds at the same time. The first world is physical, a world of atoms, energy, biology, weather, gravity, natural processes. This world exists whether you believe in it or not. The second world is different. It exists entirely inside human minds, a world made of ideas, stories, agreements, symbols, collective beliefs. This world only exists because enough people agree that it does. And yet this invisible world often has more influence over human behavior than physical reality itself. A small piece of paper can make someone feel rich. A line on a map can separate millions of people. A title can change how others treat you. A flag can inspire loyalty stronger than survival instincts. None of these things possess power on their own. The power comes from belief, shared belief, collective belief. The kind of belief that becomes so widespread, it starts to feel like reality itself. Most people never notice this. They inherit the social world the same way they inherit language, without questioning it, without examining it, without asking where it came from. But once you begin looking closely, something strange appears. Many of the most important forces shaping human civilization are not physical objects. They are collective hallucinations. Not hallucinations in the clinical sense, not fantasies, not delusions. Something far more powerful. Shared mental constructions. Stories so deeply embedded into society that they become invisible. And when something becomes invisible, it becomes difficult to question. You stop seeing it as a story. You start seeing it as reality. But what happens when entire civilizations are built upon stories? What happens when billions of people organize their lives around ideas that exist only because everyone believes in them? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, if society programs what you believe is real, how much of your reality actually belongs to you? Human beings possess a remarkable ability that no other species has developed to the same degree: the ability to believe in things that do not physically exist. Not because they are irrational, not because they are easily deceived, but because this ability allowed civilization itself to emerge. Consider money. A $100 bill is physically just paper and ink. Its material value is almost insignificant. If an alien civilization discovered a stack of banknotes on Earth, they would see colored pieces of processed fiber. Nothing more. The value does not exist in the paper. The value exists in the collective agreement. Millions of people believe the paper represents value. Therefore it does. Not because of physics, not because of nature, but because of shared belief. The same principle applies to nations. You can find mountains, you can find rivers, you can find oceans, but you cannot find a country. There is no physical object called France, or Brazil, or Japan. There are territories, there are people, there are institutions, but the nation itself exists primarily as a collective story. A story powerful enough to inspire loyalty, sacrifice, and conflict. A story that billions of people accept as real. This pattern appears everywhere: corporations, religions, economic systems, political ideologies, social status, human rights, marriage, property, laws. None of these things exist in the same way that trees or gravity exist. They exist because human beings continuously participate in maintaining them. Civilization is built upon networks of shared imagination. This may sound strange at first, But consider what happens when collective belief disappears. A currency can collapse, a government can fall, a corporation can vanish, a social norm can change within a generation. The physical world remains, but the social reality transforms. This reveals something important. Many of the structures governing human life are not fixed features of reality. They are dynamic agreements, agreements that can change, agreements that have changed countless times throughout history. The problem is that people often forget this. The stories become so familiar that they stop looking like stories. They begin to look inevitable, permanent, natural. People start believing that current systems have always existed, or that they must always exist. But history tells a different story. For thousands of years, kings ruled by divine authority. Entire civilizations accepted this as obvious. Questioning it seemed absurd. Today, many societies view the same idea as irrational. At one time, slavery was considered normal. At another time, it became morally unacceptable. At one time, women were denied basic rights in much of the world. Today, that assumption is increasingly challenged. What changed? Human biology did not suddenly transform. The planet did not change. The stories changed. The agreements changed. The collective hallucination evolved. Every generation inherits a social reality created by previous generations. Language, values, traditions, institutions, norms, beliefs. Most people accept these structures before they are old enough to examine them. A child does not choose their culture. They inherit it. They do not choose their religion. They inherit it. They do not choose their economic system. They inherit it. They do not choose their assumptions about success, status, or normality. These assumptions are installed long before conscious reflection begins. The process is so seamless that it feels natural. But natural and familiar are not the same thing. Human beings are born into stories, and eventually forget they are stories. This is where social reality becomes extraordinarily powerful, because once a belief becomes invisible, it gains tremendous influence. People stop asking whether it is true. They only ask how to function within it. The result is a civilization where billions of people navigate realities they never consciously chose. Realities inherited from the past, maintained in the present, and projected into the future. Not because they are objectively correct, but because enough people continue believing in them. And perhaps the most fascinating aspect of all is that these collective stories can influence human behavior just as strongly as physical reality. Fear of social rejection can feel more powerful than physical danger. Loss of status can feel more painful than injury. Economic symbols can determine life opportunities. Ideas can move entire populations. Beliefs can reshape nations. Stories can change history. In many ways, human civilization is not built upon concrete. It is built upon imagination. Organized imagination, shared imagination, institutionalized imagination. And once you recognize this, a new question begins to emerge. If reality is partially constructed, who is constructing it? And more importantly, who benefits from the stories that people are taught to believe? Or a single ideology, or a single leader? The source is often the invisible framework through which reality itself is interpreted. The assumptions beneath the assumptions. The stories beneath the stories. The agreements that became invisible. And once those agreements disappear from awareness, they gain extraordinary power. Because people cannot question what they cannot see. They cannot redesign what they assume is natural. They cannot transform what they believe is permanent. And perhaps this is the greatest limitation of all. Not that society is built on shared stories, but that most people never realize they are living inside them. If shared stories make civilization possible, then forgetting they are stories creates a dangerous problem. Because the moment a social construct becomes invisible, it begins to feel inevitable, permanent, natural. People stop seeing it as something humans created. They begin seeing it as something that simply exists, like gravity, like weather, like biology. But social systems are fundamentally different. They are not discovered, they are invented. And what is invented can be changed. Yet most people rarely question the structures surrounding them, not because they are incapable of critical thought, but because the structures themselves shape the way they think. From the moment a child enters society, they are surrounded by institutions that reinforce the existing reality: family, school, media, government, religion, culture. Each of these systems transmits a particular model of the world, a particular set of assumptions, a particular version of reality. Most of this process happens long before conscious reflection begins. Children learn what is normal before they learn how to question. They learn what is acceptable before they learn how to evaluate. They learn what is real before they learn how reality is constructed. And because these beliefs are acquired so early, they often feel self-evident. The assumptions disappear. Only the conclusions remain. A person may never ask why money has value, why certain social hierarchies exist, why particular traditions are considered sacred, why one economic system is treated as natural, while another is considered impossible. The system does not need to force agreement. It only needs to make alternatives difficult to imagine. This is one of the most powerful forms of social programming. Not controlling what people think, but controlling the boundaries of what they consider thinkable. History provides countless examples. There were periods when monarchy seemed inevitable, periods when slavery seemed inevitable, periods when rigid class systems seemed inevitable, periods when entire populations accepted extreme inequality as part of the natural order. In every case, the system appeared permanent until it wasn't. The illusion remained intact until enough people stopped believing it. And this reveals an important truth. Social reality depends on continuous participation. Every institution requires belief. Every system requires trust. Every social structure depends on people acting as though the story is real. When belief weakens, systems begin to change. When belief collapses, systems can disappear entirely. This creates a paradox. The structures governing society often appear stronger than the individuals who created them. Governments appear permanent. Markets appear permanent. Cultural norms appear permanent. Yet history shows that all of them can transform, sometimes gradually, sometimes almost overnight. The technical failure occurs when society forgets this flexibility, when temporary arrangements become eternal truths, when useful models become unquestionable doctrines, when adaptation is replaced by preservation. The result is stagnation. Systems designed for one era continue operating in another. Institutions built to solve old problems create new ones. People defend structures not because they work, but because they are familiar. Familiarity becomes mistaken for necessity, and necessity becomes mistaken for reality. The consequences can be seen everywhere. Economic systems continue producing outcomes that many people recognize as harmful. Educational systems often reward memorization more effectively than creativity. Political systems become trapped in cycles of polarization. Media systems increasingly compete for attention rather than understanding. Yet meaningful reform remains difficult, not because solutions are impossible, but because existing assumptions are rarely questioned deeply enough. People often attempt to solve problems while protecting the very structures creating them. They treat symptoms, they preserve causes. The deeper issue remains invisible. This pattern extends beyond institutions. It shapes personal identity as well. People inherit beliefs about success, about status, about achievement, about happiness. They spend years pursuing goals that were never consciously chosen. Goals inherited from culture, goals inherited from economics, goals inherited from social expectations. And because everyone around them appears to be pursuing the same objectives, the system feels natural. But widespread agreement does not guarantee truth. A shared illusion remains an illusion, even when millions participate. Perhaps this is why modern societies often experience increasing levels of anxiety, alienation, and confusion. Many people sense that something is wrong, yet they struggle to identify the source. Because the source is not a single institution, or a single ideology, or a single leader. The source is often the invisible framework through which reality itself is interpreted. The assumptions beneath the assumptions. The stories beneath the stories. The agreements that became invisible. And once those agreements disappear from awareness, they gain extraordinary power. Because people cannot question what they cannot see. They cannot redesign what they assume is natural. They cannot transform what they believe is permanent. And perhaps this is the greatest limitation of all. Not that society is built on shared stories, but that most people never realize they are living inside them. If the problem is not the existence of shared stories, then what is the solution? The answer is not to eliminate them. That would be impossible. Human civilization depends upon collective imagination. Without shared stories, there would be no language, no institutions, no science, no cooperation beyond small groups. The ability to create social reality is not a flaw in the human mind. It is one of humanity's greatest achievements. The problem begins when people forget they are creating it. When social constructs become sacred, when systems stop adapting, when inherited assumptions become untouchable. The goal, therefore, is not to destroy social reality. The goal is to become conscious of it, to recognize that many of the structures surrounding us are human inventions rather than natural laws. Because once something is understood as a design, it can be redesigned. This simple shift in perspective changes everything. A person looking at a mountain cannot redesign it. A person looking at gravity cannot negotiate with it. A person looking at the weather cannot vote it away. But social systems are different. Economic systems are designed. Educational systems are designed. Political systems are designed. Cultural norms are designed. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes accidentally, but designed nonetheless. And what has been designed can be improved. This was one of the central insights behind systems thinking. Most social problems are not created by bad people. They emerge from poorly designed environments. When people focus exclusively on individuals, they often miss the larger mechanisms shaping behavior. They blame greed without examining scarcity. They blame ignorance without examining education. They blame corruption without examining incentives. They blame individuals while ignoring systems. But behavior rarely emerges in isolation. Human actions are constantly influenced by surrounding conditions. Change the environment and behavior often changes with it. Change incentives and decisions change. Change education and perception changes. Change access to resources and social outcomes change. This does not mean individuals have no responsibility. It means responsibility alone is an incomplete explanation. Systems matter, perhaps more than we are comfortable admitting. The future may depend on our ability to think this way, not asking who is to blame, but asking what conditions produced this outcome. Not asking who is good or bad, but asking what system generated this behavior. This shift moves society away from moral judgment and toward problem solving, away from punishment, toward understanding, away from ideology, toward adaptation. The most successful systems in nature survive because they adapt. The same principle applies to civilization. A society that treats its institutions as permanent truths becomes rigid. A society that recognizes them as evolving tools becomes resilient. This may be the greatest advantage of understanding social reality. You stop seeing the world as fixed. You begin seeing it as unfinished, not a completed structure, but an ongoing design process. And once people understand that reality is partially constructed, something remarkable happens. Possibility returns. New ideas become imaginable. Alternative systems become visible. Future solutions become easier to explore. The walls that once seemed permanent begin to look like temporary arrangements. The invisible framework becomes visible. And what becomes visible can be changed. Perhaps this is not a reason for despair. Perhaps it is a reason for optimism. Because if human beings created the stories shaping civilization, then human beings can create better ones. Perhaps the strangest thing about human civilization is not that it is built upon shared stories. It is that most people never realize they are living inside them. From the moment you were born, reality arrived already assembled. The language you speak, the values you inherited, the institutions around you, the symbols you respect, the goals you pursue, the fears you carry. Most of them existed before you, and because they existed before you, they often appear natural, obvious, permanent. But history tells a different story. Every civilization has believed that its reality was normal. Every generation has assumed that its systems represented the natural order of things. And every generation has eventually discovered that many of those assumptions were temporary. Empires disappeared. Religions transformed. Economic systems evolved. Cultural values shifted. What once seemed eternal became historical. What once seemed unquestionable became obsolete. And yet the process continues. Even now, at this very moment, there are beliefs that billions of people accept without question, assumptions so deeply embedded in society that they appear invisible, stories so familiar that they feel like facts. Perhaps future generations will look back at our era the same way we look back at the past. They may wonder why we accepted certain inequalities, why we organized society in particular ways, why we defended systems that no longer served human well-being, why we confused tradition with truth. Perhaps they will see things that we cannot yet see, just as we can see things that previous generations could not. Because every society has blind spots. Every culture has assumptions. Every civilization mistakes some of its stories for reality. And perhaps that realization is not something to fear. Perhaps it is something to appreciate. Because if social reality is constructed, then it is not fixed. If it is designed, then it can be redesigned. If it emerged through human imagination, then imagination remains one of humanity's greatest resources. The future is not limited by the stories people inherited. It is shaped by the stories they choose to create. This does not mean every belief is false, nor does it mean that all systems are equally useful. Some stories help societies cooperate. Some help people flourish. Some increase freedom, understanding, and well-being. The challenge is not to eliminate stories. The challenge is to remain aware that they are stories, to keep questioning, to keep adapting, to keep improving the systems we create. Because the moment a society stops questioning itself, it stops evolving. And the moment people confuse their models with reality, they lose the ability to imagine alternatives. Perhaps this is the true power of awareness. Not that it provides certainty, but that it restores possibility. The possibility that things could be different. The possibility that today's assumptions are not tomorrow's truths. The possibility that civilization is still unfinished. And perhaps the most important question is no longer, what is reality? Perhaps the better question is, which parts of reality were given to me? And which parts am I helping create? Because if reality is partly a shared hallucination, then every generation becomes a participant in writing the next chapter of the story. And the future may depend on whether we remember that it is a story at all.